The wind screamed across the frozen valley. Snow fell like a wall of white. The night sky above was black and merciless. In the middle of that storm, a human man walked alone, his cloak heavy with frost, his boots sinking deep into the snow. He had seen many storms in his life, but this one was different. It felt alive, like the world itself wanted to bury him. Every step was a fight. Every breath burned like fire in his lungs. Yet he did not stop, for he had learned long ago that to stop in such cold meant death. The man was far from his home, searching for wood and supplies. His small cabin was warm, but the fire would not last forever. If he failed to return with more, he would freeze just as quickly as the storm swallowed the valley. Still, even in that dangerous night, his ears caught something strange. A faint sound, softer than the howl of the wind. At first he thought it was a trick of his mind, but then he heard it again, weak cries, like the voice of someone dying. His heart began to pound. Who would be out here? In the middle of this storm, when even the strongest beasts hid from the cold, he turned his head, straining his eyes, and there, half buried in the snow, he saw them. Two shapes, curled together in the drift. At first he thought they were children, but as he drew closer he saw their faces. They were not human. Their skin was pale with a faint shimmer, like ice touched by moonlight. Their eyes were half closed, glowing faintly with unnatural light. Their hair was long, tangled with frost, yet still beautiful. Two alien sisters lying in the snow, so weak they could not move. The man knelt beside them, pressing his hand to their cold skin. They were alive, but only barely. Their lips trembled, their breaths shallow. If he left them, they would die in minutes. He knew this storm did not forgive. Without hesitation, he pulled the first sister onto his shoulder, then lifted the second into his arms. They were light, too light, as if starvation had hollowed them. He gritted his teeth and forced his body forward through the blizzard. The snow bit at his skin. The weight dragged at his muscles, but he did not stop. Step by step, he fought against the storm, carrying the two lives that clung to the last thread of warmth. His cabin was far, but the thought of fire, of safety, gave him strength, he whispered to himself, pushing forward. At times he thought the storm would take him too, but the cries of the sisters, weak as they were, reminded him why he could not give up. Finally, through the endless white, the shadow of his cabin appeared, a small wooden shelter, barely strong enough to stand against the storm. But inside was life, heat, survival. With the last of his strength, he kicked open the door, snow blasting inside, and carried the sisters across the threshold. He laid them by the fire, his hands shaking as he wrapped them in thick blankets. The flames lit their faces, and in the light, he saw how strange and beautiful they were. Their alien features were unlike any he had seen, yet their fear, their weakness, was the same as any human's. Slowly, their breaths deepened, their bodies trembling as warmth returned. The man sat beside them, feeding the fire, watching carefully. He had no idea who they were, where they had come from, or why they were lost in the storm. But he knew one thing. He could not let them die. Something deep in his heart told him their meeting was not by chance. It felt like the storm itself had delivered them into his hands. Hours passed, the storm still raging outside. The sisters stirred, their glowing eyes opening slightly. The older one tried to speak, but her voice was broken, a whisper too weak to form words. The younger one, shivering, reached for his arm with trembling fingers. Her lips moved, and she breathed a single word, so soft he almost missed it. Husband. The man froze, the word echoing in his mind. He did not understand why she called him that. Perhaps it was delirium. Perhaps a mistake of translation. But the way her eyes looked at him, full of trust, full of desperate hope, made his heart race. The fire cracked, the wind screamed outside, and in that moment, he knew his life had changed. Forever he had gone out to search for wood, but instead, he had found two alien sisters who would bind themselves to him in ways he could not yet imagine. The storm might have ended their lives, but fate had chosen something different. Now, in his warm home, their story had only just begun. The storm, outside, roared like a monster, Snow slammed against the wooden walls, but inside the cabin there was fire, light, and the smell of burning wood. The man sat close to the flames, his eyes fixed on the two alien sisters wrapped in blankets. Their breathing was still weak but stronger than before. Color returned to their strange, shimmering skin, and their lips no longer looked blue with cold. He poured warm water into a small cup and carefully touched it to the lips of the older sister. At first she did not move. Then slowly her mouth opened and she drank. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly in the light. They were unlike human eyes, brighter, almost like jewels hidden under ice. For a moment, she only stared at him, silent as if trying to understand who he was. "You are safe now," the man said softly. "I found you in the snow." His voice was calm, steady, even though his heart beat fast. The alien girl did not answer with words, but her eyes softened, and a tear slid down her cheek. He could not tell if it was from pain, fear, or relief. The younger sister stirred next, her body trembling, her hand still clutching the blanket. She looked around the cabin, her eyes wide, like a lost child. When she saw the fire, she inched, closer, stretching her frozen fingers toward the warmth. Then she turned to the man, her lips trembling. "You saved us," she whispered in broken words. Her voice was fragile but full of meaning. The man nodded slowly. "Anyone would have," he replied, though deep inside he knew that was not true. Most would have walked past, afraid or unwilling, to help strange beings, but he could not. Something about them felt important, as if his path and theirs had crossed for a reason. The sisters tried to sit up, but their strength was not yet enough. He gently placed a pillow behind them and fed the fire more wood. The storm gave no sign of ending, and the cabin shook with the fury outside. Yet inside, it was calm, almost peaceful. For the first time, he studied them properly. Their clothes were torn, made of thin fabric not meant for such cold. They had no tools, no weapons, nothing but each other. It was a miracle they had survived the storm as long as they had. He wondered who they were, why they had been in such danger. The older sister finally found her voice, though weak and heavy. "You should not have helped us," she whispered. The words surprised him, sharp against the softness of the firelight. Her eyes carried fear, not for herself, but for him. "You don't understand," she said again, coughing as she spoke. "They will come." The Gyo man frowned, confused. "Who will come?" he asked. But the sister shook her head, closing her eyes again, too weak to explain more. The younger sister gripped his hand suddenly. Her small fingers were still cold, but her hold was desperate. "Please," she whispered. "Don't send us away, please, husband." The word struck him again. Husband. It was the second time one of them had called him that strange title. He could not tell if it was part of their language, a mistake or something deeper. Yet when she said it, her voice carried trust, as if she believed he was more than a stranger, more than a rescuer. The man sat silently, unsure, but he did not pull his hand away. Instead, he placed another blanket over them, feeding them warm broth slowly, spoon by spoon. They ate like starved children, careful but grateful. Every bite brought more life back into their glowing eyes. Hours passed, the storm refusing to calm. The sisters drifted between sleep and wakefulness, always looking at him with a mixture of fear and hope. He felt their gaze, heavy and strange, but not unwelcome. He told himself he would keep them safe until they were strong again. That was all, nothing more. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The moment he carried them through the storm, his life had already changed. These were not ordinary travelers. Their presence carried a weight, a secret he had not yet uncovered. As night stretched on, he heard a sound beyond the storm, a faint howl, not of wind, not of any beast he knew. It was distant, yet sharp enough to cut through the noise of the blizzard. The older sister's eyes snapped open, fear burning bright. "They are searching," she whispered, her voice trembling. They will not stop until they find us. The man stood, staring at the door, his hand moving to the axe he kept by the wall. His cabin had been a place of peace, a place of survival against the cold. But now, it was becoming something else, a shield against enemies he did not yet know. The sisters clung closer to each other, their glowing eyes fixed on him. In their gaze, he saw something strange. Trust and desperation bound together. They were not just strangers in need. They had chosen him whether he wanted it or not, chosen him to be their protector, their safe place, their husband. The fire burned brighter, the storm roared louder, and outside, in the endless snow, something moved closer. The man did not yet know the danger that would come, but he knew one thing with certainty. His life would never return to silence. The warmth of strangers had already become the start of something greater. The storm outside finally began to weaken. By morning, the furious winds had softened, leaving only quiet snow falling like dust from the sky. The world looked white and silent, but inside the cabin, the fire still burned. The man sat in his chair, sharpening his old axe, his eyes watching the two alien sisters sleeping by the flames. They looked peaceful now, wrapped in blankets, their breathing steady. But he remembered the fear in their eyes the night before. "They will come," the older one had whispered. Those words stayed in his mind like a warning carved in stone. When the younger sister stirred, he put aside the axe. Her glowing eyes opened slowly, soft yet full of sadness. For a moment she only stared at him, then she whispered, "You saved us again." He gave a small nod, saying nothing. But the truth was clear. Without him, they would not be alive. The older sister woke soon after. Coughing lightly, her strength was weak, but her gaze was sharp. She looked at him for a long time before speaking. "You should not have brought us here," she said in a low voice. Her tone was heavy, like she carried a burden too great for her thin frame. The man leaned forward, his voice calm. "Tell me why." His words were simple, but they carried weight. The sisters exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, the older one spoke. "We ran away," she whispered. "From someone powerful, someone who will not forgive us." The man frowned, his hand tightening on the axe handle. "Who?" he asked. Her voice shook as she answered. "An alien lord. He claimed us as his own, like property, like objects he could trade. We are rare among our people. Our bloodline carries power. That is why he wanted us, why he will chase us until the stars burn out." The younger sister trembled and pressed closer to her sibling, her eyes filled with tears glowing faintly in the dim light. "He would rather see us dead than free," she whispered. Her voice broke, and she hid her face in the blanket. The cabin fell silent except for the crackle of firewood. The man listened, his jaw tight. He had seen cruelty before, had fought against the cold hand of survival. But to hear that these sisters were hunted, treated as things and not lives, it stirred a deep anger inside him. Still he said nothing, only fed the fire more wood. The silence was his answer, but the sisters could see the resolve in his eyes. The older sister studied him carefully. "You do not understand the danger," she said, her voice sharp but weary. "If you keep us here, they will come for you. Too, they will burn your home, they will break your body, you cannot fight them." Her words were meant to scare him, but the man only gave a slow, steady look. "I will not throw you back into the snow," he said. Simple words, yet they carried the weight of a promise. The sisters froze, surprised by his calm courage. For a moment, their eyes softened, as if hope had entered their hearts for the first time in years, but outside the snow was not empty. The man's sharp ears caught a faint crunch too heavy to be the fall of snow. He rose to his feet, axe in hand, and moved toward the window. Peering out, he saw nothing but endless white. Yet something in his gut told him he was being watched. The older sister saw his tense stance and whispered, "They are here." Her voice shook, but there was no doubt in her words. The younger sister clung to her, fear rising like a wave. "They will not stop," she cried. "They always find us." The man stood still, staring into the storm, Shadows seemed to move at the edge of his vision, shifting in the snow like ghosts. He knew the sisters were not lying. Someone truly was searching. For them, he closed the shutters tight and added more wood to the fire. The cabin filled with heat and light, a fragile shield against the darkness outside. The sisters huddled close together, whispering in their own tongue. The words were soft, but filled with grief and worry. The man could not understand their language, but he understood their fear. It was the fear of prey that had never known safety, the fear of chains always waiting just behind the next door. When the younger sister finally looked at him again, her eyes glistened with tears. "You are not like the others," she whispered. "Others passed us in the snow. They looked at us and kept walking, but you carried us. You gave us fire. You gave us life. That is why we call you husband, because in our people's way, the one who saves with fire, the one who shelters with his own strength, becomes bound to us forever." The man's breath caught. Now he understood. It was not a mistake, not delirium. It was their truth, their vow. To them, he was not just a rescuer. He was family, protector, husband. The weight of that word pressed upon him, heavy and strange, yet not unwelcome. Outside, the wind howled again. The shadows in the snow drew closer, unseen but felt. The sisters leaned into him, their glowing eyes filled with desperate trust, and the man realized that his quiet life had ended the moment he pulled them from the drift. A new storm was coming, not of ice and snow, but of blood and fire. Night returned, and with it came silence that felt wrong. The storm had passed, but the quiet was not peace. It was heavy, sharp, as if the world outside the cabin was holding its breath. The man sat near the door, his axe across his knees, the firelight dancing across his face. The alien sisters rested, close to the fire, their glowing eyes watching him with unspoken fear. The older sister had warned him. "They will come," she had said. And now, in the deep stillness of night, he felt her words becoming true. A sound broke the silence. The crunch of footsteps in the snow, slow, steady, deliberate. The man stiffened, his hand gripping the axe handle tight. He rose silently, moving to the window. Through the frost glass, he saw dark shapes moving just beyond the edge of the trees. Not animals, not shadows, these shapes walked with purpose. The younger sister gasped softly, covering her mouth. "They found us," she whispered, her voice trembling like a child's. The older sister pulled her close, her own face pale with dread. "They will not stop," she said. "Not until we are taken, or dead." The man did not waste words. He set another log on the fire, then barred the door with heavy wood. The cabin was small, but it was strong, and he had built it with his own hands. It had always kept out the storm, now it would have to keep out hunters. A low, eerie whistle came from outside. It was not human. It carried through the air like a signal. Another answered it. Closer this time. Then silence again. The man's heart pounded, but his face stayed calm. He whispered only 2 words. "Stay low." The sisters obeyed, sinking down behind the fire, their eyes wide with fear. The first strike came without warning. A blast of energy hit the wall, shaking the cabin. Sparks flew as wood cracked and splintered. The sisters cried out, clutching each other. But the man stood firm, axe ready, eyes locked on the door. Another strike hit. Louder, harder. The door rattled, the bar groaned. Shadows moved closer, their shapes clearer now. Tall figures wrapped in dark armor, their weapons glowing faintly blue. Alien hunters, just as the sisters had said. The man's cabin shook again as a third blow struck. The wood cracked but held. The hunters outside hissed in frustration, their voices sharp and alien. The man's grip tightened, his knuckles white on the axe handle. The older sister crawled closer, her voice low, urgent. "You cannot fight them. They are too strong. Please run." But the man only shook his head, slowly. "This is my home," he said, his voice steady like stone. "I do not run from it." The hunters began circling, their shadows moving past the windows. One leaned close to the glass, and for a moment the man saw its face, cold, pale, with eyes like frozen fire. It sneered, baring teeth too sharp to be human. Then it slammed its hand against the window, cracking it. The younger sister whimpered, her small body shaking. The older one held her tighter, whispering words in their own tongue, prayers or promises. The man stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the door. He raised his axe, ready. The first hunter tried the door, pushing hard. The bar held, but the hinges screamed. Then with a roar, the creature slammed its weapon against the door. The wood burst open, fragments flying into the cabin. Cold wind rushed in, carrying with it the shadow of death. The man moved without hesitation, his axe swung in a wide arc, burying deep into the shoulder of the first hunter. The alien screamed, its voice like metal tearing. It staggered back, blood dark and strange spilling across the snow. The others hissed in fury, rushing forward. The man's heart thundered, but he did not retreat. He fought with the strength of survival, every swing of the axe fueled by determination. The sisters watched, their eyes wide with shock. They had expected him to hide, to fall, to surrender. But instead, he fought like fire in human form. One hunter fell. Another staggered, but they were many, and he was only one. The older sister crawled forward, grabbing his arm. "You cannot win," she cried, her eyes desperate. "They will send more. They will never stop." The man pulled free, shoving her back toward safety. His voice was rough but certain. "Then let them come." The hunters hesitated, regrouping. One of them snarled, pulling a small device from its belt. It pressed it against the doorframe, leaving behind a mark that glowed faint red. The alien hissed words in its tongue, words the man could not understand, but the older sister paled, her voice breaking as she explained. "They have marked this place, now the whole galaxy will know where we are." The hunters retreated into the storm, their shadows fading. But the mark on the door pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. The danger was not gone, it had only grown. The man stood in the wreckage of his door, chest heaving, blood on his hands. The sisters stared at him, their eyes wide with awe and fear. They had seen humans before, but never like this. Never one who stood against the storm, against death. For them, the cabin was no longer hidden. The galaxy had been invited to hunt, and the war for survival had only just begun. The cabin was quiet after the attack, but it was not the silence of peace. It was heavy, filled with smoke from the fire, and the scent of strange alien blood that stained the floor. The broken door was patched with wood and nails, but the mark left by the hunters still glowed faintly red, pulsing like a warning. Every beat of that light told them the same truth. The enemy would return, and next time, they would not come alone. The man sat by the fire, sharpening his axe, his face hard and unreadable. The sisters watched him from the corner, their glowing eyes reflecting the flames. They whispered in their own tongue, voices soft with worry. The younger one finally spoke in broken human words, her tone trembling. "You fought them. You stood against them, but they will come again. Why do you risk your life for us?" The man looked up, his eyes steady. "I will not let you freeze in the snow," he said simply. It was not a grand speech, but the weight of his voice carried something stronger than promises. It was the voice of someone who had decided and would not turn back. The sisters exchanged a glance, their expressions softening. The older one leaned closer, her voice quiet but sharp with fear. "You don't understand. Once marked, no place is safe. They will hunt until all is ashes. You should send us away, or they will burn your life too." "But—" The man shook his head slowly. "This is my home," he said, his hand tightening around the axe. "And if they come again, I will fight again." The sisters fell silent, their eyes filled with something new. It was not only fear now, it was trust. Trust they had not given to anyone for a long time. Days passed, each one tense and heavy. The man worked quietly, reinforcing the cabin with stronger wood, setting traps around the edge of the forest, sharpening blades, preparing. The sisters helped where they could, though their bodies were still weak. They carried water, cleaned the wounds he earned in the fight, and cooked simple meals with trembling hands. The warmth of their presence filled the cabin with a strange sense of family, even as fear hung over them. At night, the three sat close to the fire. The sisters told him small pieces of their past, their voices heavy with sadness. They had grown up in a place of endless stars, a world ruled by a cruel lord who treated them as treasures to be owned. They were forced to obey, forced to smile when their hearts were broken. When they tried to escape, the Lord sent hunters after them, bound by blood oath to drag them back. The younger sister's eyes filled with tears as she spoke. We ran. For years, across worlds, across storms, but always they found us, always we lost everything. Her voice cracked, and she looked at the man, her hands trembling. But when you carried us, when you gave us fire, you gave us more than life. You gave us hope again. The man said nothing, but the weight in his chest grew heavy. He had never thought of himself as a savior. He was just a man surviving in the cold. But to them, he was more. One night, as the fire burned low, the older sister placed her hand on his. Her touch was warm, now no longer frozen like the night he had found her. In our people's way, she said softly, the one who saves us with fire, who shields us from death becomes bound, not by choice but by fate. That is why we call you husband. It is not a mistake, it is our truth. The man stared at her, silent, his heart beating hard. The younger sister leaned against him, her small voice whispering, please, don't. Leave us even if the galaxy comes, don't let go. The firelight flickered, casting their faces in gold and shadow. He felt their trust pressing on him like the weight of the storm itself. He could have sent them away, could have saved himself, but he knew he never would. Outside, the snow fell quietly. Yet in the distance, he thought he saw a red glow on the horizon, faint but steady. Ships, perhaps, or fires from enemies drawing closer. The hunters were not finished. The mark on his door still pulsed, calling them. The sisters saw it too, their glowing eyes tightening with fear. The older one whispered, they are coming. The younger clung to him, trembling, her voice breaking. If they take us again, we will not survive. Not this time. The man rose, standing tall against the firelight, his axe in hand. His voice was calm, but his words cut like iron. Then they will not take you. The sisters looked up at him, their fear battling with the strange warmth. In their hearts, in that moment, they were no longer just refugees, no longer just hunted. They were his and he was theirs, bound together by fire, fear, and something far deeper. The cabin wall shook as a distant rumble rolled through the forest. The ground trembled, the red glow in the sky grew brighter. The hunters were not walking this time. They were coming in, greater force. The man's grip tightened on the axe, his eyes sharp and unyielding. The bond between them had been sealed, and now they would face the storm together. The night burned red. From the horizon, alien ships descended, their lights cutting through the storm like blades. The forest shook as engines roared, snow falling from the trees in heavy waves. The man stood at the door of his cabin, axe in hand, his eyes fixed on the sky. The sisters pressed close behind him, their glowing eyes wide with fear. They are here, the older one whispered, her voice tight with dread. The younger clutched his arm, trembling. They will not stop this time. They will take us. They will kill you. The man said nothing. His silence was heavier than words. He looked at the small cabin that had been his home, his place of peace. Now it was a battlefield, and he was ready. The ships landed in the snow with a thunderous crash. Dark armored hunters poured out, dozens of them, their weapons glowing with blue fire. They moved like shadows surrounding the cabin, their voices hissing in a language sharp and cruel. The sisters held each other, their bodies trembling. But the man only stepped forward, his axe raised. The first wave came fast. A hunter rushed. The door, blade glowing. The man swung his axe with raw strength, splitting the creature's chest. It fell, screaming, blood dark against the snow. The sisters gasped, their fear mixing with awe. This was no ordinary man. He fought like someone born for storms. More hunters charged, breaking through the windows, smashing against the patched door. The cabin shook under the assault. The man moved with fury, striking, blocking, throwing them, back with strength and will. The firelight flickered across the walls as the battle raged inside. The older sister cried out, her hands glowing faintly with hidden power. She raised them, unleashing a burst of energy that sent a hunter flying. Back through the door, the younger followed, her own hands trembling as light burst from her palms, blinding the enemy for a moment. They had hidden their strength, but now, side by side with him, they fought. The hunters hissed in rage, their numbers pressing harder. The cabin walls cracked, wood splintering, snow and wind rushing inside. The man's body bled, his arm cut, his face bruised, but he stood unyielding, every breath a vow that he would not fall. Outside, the leader stepped forward, a tall figure clad in black armor, eyes burning like cold fire. Its voice was deep, cruel, carrying across the snow. "The sisters belong to me," it said. "Human, step aside or be crushed." The man spat blood, his grip tightening on the axe. His voice was rough but steady. "They belong to no one." The leader raised a hand and the hunters surged forward again. The battle turned into chaos, blades clashing, walls collapsing. The sisters screamed his name, their voices breaking. They saw him stand against wave after wave, a lone figure against the storm, and something inside them broke free. The older sister's body blazed with light, her hidden power burning bright. The younger followed, her glow merging with her sister's. Together, they unleashed a storm of energy, pushing the hunters back in a wave of fire and light. The man shielded his eyes, the cabin shaking under the force. When the light faded, many hunters lay broken in the snow, but the leader still stood untouched, his armored figure towering in the storm. He stepped forward, weapon glowing, his voice a hiss of rage. "You cannot win, human. You are nothing, and they are mine." The man's breath came heavy, his strength nearly gone, but his eyes burned with fire. He stood between the leader and the sisters, blood dripping from his wounds. His voice was low but filled with iron. "Then come and take them," the leader roared, charging. The man swung his axe, steel against alien blade, sparks flying. The ground shook with every clash, snow blasting into the air. The sisters cried out, their hands glowing again, pouring their strength into him, binding themselves to him. Their voices rose in their own tongue, ancient words of vow and bond. The leader struck hard, but the man held his ground. Every blow rattled his bones, but he refused to fall. He was no soldier, no warrior of legend. He was only human, but in that moment, he was more. The sister's power wrapped around him like fire. His strength surged, his body moving with fury and light. With a final roar, he swung the axe, cleaving through the leader's weapon, through its armor. The alien lord staggered, screaming, falling into the snow with a crash. The battlefield fell silent. The hunters, seeing their leader broken, hissed in fear and fled into the storm. The red mark on the cabin flickered and died, its glow fading into nothing. The man fell to his knees, his chest heaving, his axe heavy in his hands. The sisters rushed to him, tears streaming, their glowing eyes filled with relief. "You stood," the older whispered, her voice breaking. "You fought for us when no one else would." The younger clung to him, sobbing softly. "You are ours now, bound by fire and blood, husband of two worlds." The man closed his eyes, exhausted. The storm had passed, but he knew this was only the beginning. He had stood against the galaxy's cruelty, and won. But the bond he had forged with them would bring even greater storms. The battlefield was quiet. Snow drifted gently across the ruined cabin, covering the bodies of fallen hunters. The red glow of enemy ships had faded into the dark sky, leaving only silence. The man stood weakly in the doorway, blood staining his clothes, his axe heavy in his hand. The sisters clung to him, their glowing eyes wet with tears. They had fought. They had survived, but their hearts still trembled from the storm of battle. The younger whispered, her voice soft as the falling snow. "You stood against them. You faced death for us." The older pressed her hand to his chest, feeling the heavy beat of his heart. "You are more than a rescuer, more than a man. You are our bond, our husband." The man looked at them, silent, his breath heavy. He had never asked for this, never sought to be bound to alien sisters hunted across the stars. But fate had chosen, and his heart could not deny what their eyes begged of him. They were his, now, and he was theirs, The cabin, once a shelter, was broken. Walls splintered, windows shattered, the mark of war burned into its frame. It would no longer keep the cold at bay, nor hide them from the galaxy. Yet the man did not despair. He looked at the ruins and then at the sisters, and his voice was steady. If the world comes for us, then we will face it together. The sisters' faces softened. The younger clung to his arm, her voice trembling. We have always run, always hidden, but with you, we are not afraid anymore. The older nodded, her eyes burning with quiet. Strength. You are human, yet you carry more courage than lords with armies. In our way, when we bind ourselves, it is forever. You are our protector, our fire, our husband. The man placed his hand on theirs. He did not speak grand words, but his silence was enough. His choice was made. Days passed as they rebuilt. The sisters worked beside him, gathering wood, repairing what they could. Their laughter, soft and rare, began to fill the air. For the first time in years, they felt more than fear. They felt home. At night, the fire glowed, casting warm light across their faces. They sat close together, speaking of their world, of stars he had never seen. They told him of great cities shining like crystal, of endless skies filled with war, of the cruelty of the Lord who once claimed them. But when they spoke of the future, they did not speak of running anymore. They spoke of standing, of fighting if they must, but never again alone. The man listened, his heart steady. He had lived a simple life before, a quiet life against the cold. Now that life was gone, replaced by something larger, heavier, but stronger, he was no longer just a man in the snow. He was husband of two alien sisters, bound not by law, not by chains, but by fire, blood, and choice. Yet danger had not ended. One night, as the fire burned low, the older sister looked at him with serious eyes. The hunters will tell of this. Word will spread across the stars. The Lord who chased us will not stop. He will come himself one day. The younger shivered, whispering, "And when he comes, he will bring armies." The man said nothing at first. He looked at the stars through the broken window, sharp and endless. His voice came calm, quiet, but strong. Then let him come. The sisters exchanged a glance, their fear softening into awe, for in his voice they heard not pride, but certainty. The bond between them grew deeper with each passing day. They cooked together, laughed together, shared stories of their worlds. The younger sister often held his hand, clinging with childlike trust. The older stood at his side, sharp and steady, her strength balancing his own. Together, the three of them became something the hunters could not understand. A family born of fire and fear, but stronger than chains. Winter began to fade, the snow melting slowly under a weak sun. The cabin still bore scars of battle, but it stood, and within its walls a new life grew. Not free of danger, not free of fear, but filled with warmth stronger than the storm. One evening, as the last light of day faded, the man stood outside. With the sisters at his side, the world was quiet, the sky painted with stars. The younger leaned against him, her voice soft as a sigh. "We are not alone anymore." The older placed her hand over his heart, whispering, "Together, we are stronger than fear, stronger than the storm, stronger than the Lord who hunts us." The man looked at them both, their glowing eyes shining like stars, and for the first time in many years he allowed himself a small smile. Whatever storms would come, whatever hunters or lords might rise, he would face them, not as a lone man in the snow, but as husband of two worlds, protector of the bond fate had given him. And so the story did not end, it had only just begun.